Why do I always bash Canon? That's the kind of comment that I've seen a few times on recent videos. Generally videos surrounding Canon. Now, I want to set the record straight on this, because I think there's a few people out there that just think that I have some vendetta against Canon, that regardless of whatever they say or do, I'm just going to criticize them for it. And I want to kind of make the point that that is not the case. Now, I only make videos about Canon either when there's an announcement or when there's very interesting looking rumors, and I will give my opinions on them. Now, I've done the same with Sony, I've done the same with Nikon, Zeiss, Sigma, Tamron, loads of different manufacturers. And in every manufacturer, I've spoken positively and negatively about various products. However, anytime I do it with Canon, there is a much bigger swarm of people who will come charging in, accusing me of just flat out bashing Canon purely because it's got a Canon badge on it. And it's usually the same sort of comments that I see people making. So rather than answer the same thing with every single comment every time this comes up, I figured I would rather condense all of the comments into one video, answer them all in one go, and hopefully lay to rest once and for all that I do not have some vendetta against Canon. I am not out to persecute them for anything. Okay, they do something, I have an opinion on the matter. I don't hate everything that Canon does, it's just that recently they've taken a shift in mentality that I don't agree with. So the first kind of comment that I see a few people mention, which annoys the shit out of me, is along the lines of, you shoot Sony now, so your opinion on Canon is irrelevant. Now, these comments annoy me on a few different levels. Firstly, because these people are probably Canon shooters who are just simply defending Canon because they're Canon, and I've no doubt have expressed their opinions about Sony and Nikon and every other manufacturer that's not Canon, having never shot them before. So to say I'm not allowed to express my opinions on a product just because I don't shoot that manufacturer is complete shit, basically. Secondly, I used to shoot Canon. Canon was the first camera that I ever bought, and I stuck with them solidly for 8 years. I got the 550D, I sold that to get the 7D, I then got the 5D Mark II to go alongside that, I swapped them both for 5D Mark III, I then got the 7D Mark II to go along with that, and then I ended up selling them all and switching to Sony. Now, I didn't switch to Sony because I have some burning desire to be a Sony shooter. I moved away from Canon because I knew in my mind what I wanted from a camera. I knew what I was looking for in a camera. So I was hoping the 5D Mark IV was going to answer my prayers, but it didn't go far enough for me. For what it would have cost me to switch from the Mark III to the Mark IV, it didn't offer the video features that I was looking for. Then I hoped that maybe the 6D Mark II would offer what I was looking for. And again, that just didn't fulfill the feature sets. Then after that, I'd considered the D850, but that was a full switch from Canon to Nikon, and that was going to be an expensive switch. And the problem is with that as well, there's no adapting anything. It is sell everything Canon based and buy everything Nikon, and that was a hell of an investment and not enough for me. I then also considered Sony cameras, but the A9, A7R III, very expensive camera bodies, at least they definitely were at the time. And the second generation Sony cameras, whilst more affordable, had issues that I wasn't happy with, particularly the poor battery life, the not brilliant reviews about autofocus and such. So I had reservations about the Sony system. So I stuck with Canon, I bought an M3 mirrorless to fulfill my video needs, and I hung out on the hope that Canon would bring out a better camera further down the line. When Sony released the A7 III, for me, it was a no-brainer because it basically gave me everything that I was looking for and more, and even cheaper than I ever imagined it. This then leads on to another comment that I quite often see, which is, would I switch back to Canon? So it's all well and good me bringing out a video saying this Canon camera is not as good as the competition because X, Y, and Z features are missing. Now, if Canon brought out a camera that was better than the one I had now, would I switch back to them? No. And not because it's Canon, just because I don't need to. Right now, the Sony a7 III fulfills my needs perfectly. Is it a perfect camera? Not at all. There are issues that I have with it, but they are small, niggly issues that are not a deal breaker for me. There are workarounds for them, they are a bit of an inconvenience, but they are not a justified reason for an entire switch back to a Canon system. Now, if a few years down the line my needs and requirements from my camera change and the a7 III doesn't fulfill that, then I'm going to look to change the camera. Being already invested in the Sony system, it would make sense for me to look at another Sony camera. But then if I find myself back in the situation where my current chosen manufacturer doesn't have a camera on the market that fulfills what I'm looking for, but there is another manufacturer that does, then I'm going to consider moving to them. Then there's my absolute favorite comment that I see people posting, which is, "You're being paid by Sony to bash on Canon." Because yes, a huge multi-billion-pound corporation like Sony would pay a small-time YouTuber like me to bash on Canon, wouldn't they? They wouldn't use any of their, I don't know, marketing department or ambassadors or anything like that. No. Okay, all the Sony gear that I have, I bought with my own money. All the Canon gear that I used to own, I bought with my own money. No camera company pays me to spread propaganda about anybody, okay? If I've got something to say about a manufacturer or about a product, it's my opinions on that matter, not theirs. Now, in the last couple of videos that I did, I kind of looked at the future plans of Canon, what the rumors are of what Canon might be doing, and my opinions as to what I think or what I would like to see Canon do in the future in terms of their lineups and the specs of the cameras within those lineups. These videos usually then bring in a couple of comments of people saying, Canon are a huge, big, successful business. They're the biggest camera company on the market and you're just a small-time YouTuber, so what the fuck do you know? And that is partially true, okay? No question about that. Canon is the most successful camera company currently on the market. They dominate the market shares, and I am just a moron in front of a camera. Except Canon and I look at things in two very different ways, because Canon are focused entirely on making money from a business perspective, whereas I am looking at it from a photographer's perspective and the market as a whole. So Canon only give a shit about one thing: making money. That's it. That's the only reason they went into business in the first place, because they want to make money. So every decision that they make is about making as much money as possible. Whereas for me, because I don't have a particular allegiance as to any manufacturer, all I want to see is innovation. I want to see technology move on. I want to see cameras get better and better and better. So they have no incentive for making the best possible camera that they can, because that's just going to mean lower profit margins. They know they can get away with making a subpar camera and selling it for more. People will still lap it up, and it's going to make them more profit. The other companies who are fighting for market share, they have to go the step further to try and attract people to them. That's why you see them being more ruthless in the features that they're putting into their cameras. They can't just be somewhere near Canon, they have to be ahead of them in order to get noticed. And Canon used to be like that, because years ago, back in the film era, Canon were not the biggest manufacturer back then. You had companies like Kodak and Milito and Pentax and Olympus. They were the big names back then, and Canon were in amongst that, but they weren't the big fish. When digital came about, however, Canon were more ruthless. They were the ones who took the risk early in the new technology, and nobody knew whether it would stick or not. And all the big companies were a little bit more skeptical, and they were a little bit tentative about moving into digital. And by the time everybody else realized what was going on, it was too late for them to catch up. They tried to make the move, but by that point, the loyalty was gone. Then Canon grew and grew and grew and dominated the market. And once they'd reached domination, they kind of just sat back and thought, why bother? Where's the incentive to keep pushing and driving? We're there. History's repeating now with Sony, because Sony were the first to make the big leap into full-frame mirrorless. And now everyone else is following on behind them, but Sony are already 3 generations ahead of everybody else. Because that's another comment that gets then mentioned, which is Canon are too successful to fail. Canon are the biggest camera manufacturer on the market. They're not just gonna disappear. It's not the first time it's happened. Because like I just said, Kodak. Okay, Kodak, a couple of decades ago, was one of the biggest names in the camera market. They were slow to make the transition from film to digital, and they're still around, but nobody talks about them anymore. Same with Nokia. You know, back when I was growing up, you didn't know a single person who didn't own a Nokia. Okay, everybody I knew owned Nokia phones. And then Apple turned up out of left field with the iPhone. And initially, everybody dismissed it. It's a gimmick, it'll pass, it's a fad. By the time Nokia realized that the smartphone was the next big thing, they were too far gone. Everybody had already moved away from them. And once people are gone, it's very hard to get them back. And then lastly, there's been a few people who pointed out that after the release of the EOS R, Canon took a 22% chunk out of the full-frame mirrorless market that Sony had dominated. And while that is true, you have to remember that those figures are slightly flawed, because really, up until last year, Sony were the only people in the full-frame mirrorless market. Because the market has grown. That 22% that Canon have taken isn't 22% of Sony shooters have moved from Sony to Canon. That is 22% of Canon's DSLR market share has now started to move into the mirrorless market share. Because I can guarantee most of the people who bought the Canon EOS R are already Canon shooters, or they've never fully transitioned away from Canon. They were people who wanted a mirrorless camera, didn't want to switch to a different system, they wanted Canon to release a mirrorless camera. So yes, of the overall market, Canon have taken their share of it, but the market's growing hugely, so they've not actually detracted anything from Sony. But that is actually what I want to see. I want to see Canon bring a camera out that can actually get people selling Sony gear and buying back into Canon. Because, again, despite what some people might believe, I don't want to see Canon disappear. I don't want to see them fade into the books of history. I want to see Canon bring out a camera that is going to rival the top offerings of the rest of the manufacturers, that's going to make them think, we need to up our game even more here and bring out the next generation of technology. But right now, Canon don't seem interested in it. Canon at the minute seem to be quite happy with bringing out what is, in my opinion, products that are overpriced and underspec'd, because that's going to give them higher profit margins. And I appreciate that for a lot of people, specs are irrelevant. Okay, one of the reasons that I bought the A7 III was for video capabilities. The EOS R doesn't have video capabilities. But does that make the EOS R a bad camera? No. Reducing features on a camera doesn't make it a bad camera. It just means that the potential pool of customers that you are going to appeal to shrinks. You could bring out a camera that's only 8 megapixels, shoots a frame a second, and has no video at all. Doesn't make it a bad camera. It just means that it's not going to appeal to very many people. So there we are, okay? I hope that clears my standpoint, okay? I do not have a vendetta against Canon, but by the same token, I'm not secretly still in love with Canon. I'm not in love with Sony either. Cameras are a tool. I bought the tool that gets the job done for me. That's it. I want to see Canon bring out products that challenge the competition, either in specs or in price point. Whether that is similarly spec'd and similarly priced, or whether that is lower spec'd but lower priced. And right now for me, Canon are not doing that. Canon for me are relying too much on brand loyalty and their name to get them by, and I would like to see them change that mentality. But that's just my standpoint, okay? Hopefully this has cleared things up for you now, okay? If I say bad things about Canon, it's not because I hate them, it's because I want to see them do better. But that's it for this video. If you have any comments of any kind, I have no doubt you will leave them in the box down below. Thank you so much for stopping by, and hopefully I will see you in the next video.